Hello everyone, and thanks for joining me for what's going to be my first N-scale layout update video in a while. I know you've seen a number of run session videos from me recently, most recently the 12 days of N-scale in 2022, which I filmed on this layout. So to give a quick recap of the last 2 years. 2 years ago, I decided to get back into N-scale model railroading, and I bought a Kato Amtrak Genesis starter set, which featured a different Amtrak P42 than the one you see running, and it had the 3 superliner cars that you see at the back of this train, and it had a loop of Kato Unitrack and a control pack, and that was it. And so a little over a year ago, I framed a small shelf layout to start building a, quote, real model railroad inside the house. But the problem was I was buying a lot of larger locomotives and larger rolling stock. I have quite an Amtrak collection now. You're only seeing a small part of it. I bought the passenger coaches to turn into the Lehigh Gorge Scenic Railway. I bought several GG1s. I have a Pennsylvania Railroad T1 steam locomotive and the new Union Pacific Big Boy steam locomotive that you see on the back of the layout, and a number of other larger pieces. And let's face it, the shelf layout was not the right layout for these larger trains. So last summer, around the middle to late June, I decided to frame up this layout that you see here, and as you know, I've named this layout Winter Haven. This would have been my second N-scale layout, and I didn't film anything of it at the time because I really wanted to surprise you guys with it for the 12 days of N-scale. And I suppose I did that, but what you're seeing in front of you here was not what I planned. I had actually hoped to spend the summer and the fall and the early winter building this, and okay, it certainly wasn't going to be done, but I wanted something that looked a little more like a real model railroad by the time I filmed 12 Days of N-scale for 2022. Well, obviously what you're seeing here, this is temporary. The framing is not. The framing is done. So all of the decorations and buildings you see here are temporary. These are just some generic things I bought at Michael's and painted up, and a string of lights I got from Lowe's, and just some other little knickknacks I have strewn about. So obviously what you see here is temporary, and I threw this together at the last minute just so that it looked like something other than green styrofoam board for filming the 12 Days of N-scale. Now, why between June and say late November when I started filming that series, why didn't I get anything done? Well, let's just say life happened. And in those couple of months, I actually went from what would have been my second layout to now owning 4 N-scale layouts. And that's what I wanted to talk to you about in this video. I'm going to give you a tour of all 4 layouts, and I'm going to talk about the status of each one, and just at a high level what my plans are for them going forward. And we are going to start with Winter Haven because for now it's probably the layout you're most familiar with. I have 3 of these layouts in the garage. My shelving layout is inside the house. I'm not 100% sure that the garage is going to be the final location for these 3 layouts, and even if it is, I will probably move them within the garage. But what happened is, and I'll keep this at a very high level, my parents had to move out of their house and into a nursing home. My sister and I had to clean out their house, hence how I ended up with the other 2 layouts, but I also ended up with a lot of other stuff that is taking up a lot of room. Let's just say finding a permanent place for these 3 layouts is going to be a little bit of a project in its own right. Anyway, given that I have 4 layouts, and I had already named this one Winter Haven, and you may have seen, if you saw my Christmas in July video, you'll know that I filmed that one on my original childhood layout named Spring Valley. I decided to go with naming them all 4 of them for the seasons. So we'll start with winter here, and we're literally going to go in order by season. And in doing so, that'll also mean that the 4th layout, which you haven't seen at all yet on this channel, that'll actually be last. So let's stick around for that. But enough of the introduction here. Let's move on to this layout itself. So this is Winter Haven. It measures 6 feet wide by 4 feet deep. It was designed so that I could walk around all 4 sides of it, even though the 4th side is blocked off at the moment. That's temporary. And my main objectives for this layout were twofold. I wanted somewhere, obviously, that the bigger trains could run. And the second thing is, I really just wanted simple, continuous running of the trains. The switching layout is a total opposite. That's very hands-on, interactive. This, as you can see from this Amtrak train running around, I could just set this to run and sit back and watch and enjoy. And I guess there was really a third conceptual objective here, and that was to keep the track flat. Anytime you introduce grades with N scale, the running gets a little complicated, and I really just wanted trouble-free, easy running of this. And what I ultimately will be doing is giving this depth via the scenery. So the track will be flat, but you'll still feel like you're looking at, or at least I hope you're going to feel like you're looking at a mountainous part of Pennsylvania that resembles something of the area that I live in. And okay, I guess I should have counted my objectives before filming the video. There was a fourth one. I want to be able to run 2 trains at a time, hence why I have 2 loops. Now right now, you see this one is doing the double crossover thing here. I'm borrowing my cat's laser pointer, but they're not out here, so they're not going to go after it. And so I have an option here. I can run 1 train like I'm doing here, and you'll see that this train will follow the red dot just like my cats do. And it'll go through the crossover, it'll go through the outer loop, and then it'll cross again to the inner loop. Pretty simple stuff. But alternately, I could flip the switches on this crossover and run 1 train on the outer loop and 1 train on the inner loop. Now right now, I have 2 power packs. It's not yet wired for 2-cab operation, but it's going to be. So right now, the MRC Tech 6 is the only one that supplies power to the track. So anything I do with that controller is going to control anything that's on the track. And the Kato standard SX power pack right now is just controlling the double crossover, but that will be wired as the second power pack. Now the reason I upgraded one of these to the Tech 6 is I do have a couple of DCC engines now, and you really need this controller to get proper DC operation in terms of throttle control and to be able to control the sounds and lights. I may at some point upgrade the Kato pack to another MRC Tech 6, but that's not a priority right now. Now the track plan you see is pretty close to the permanent track plan. I did recently buy some parts to upgrade a few things, and that was one interesting thing that came as a result of doing all the running for the 12 days of N scale. So I found out the inner radius curves are still too tight. Right now the inner curves are the R282s and the outer curves are the R315s. So far everything I bought runs just fine on the outer loop. I have some problems with some trains running on the inner loop. The larger steam locomotives, the T1 and the Big Boy, absolutely cannot run on that tighter loop. The passenger cars I bought to make the Lehigh Gorge Scenic Railway cars don't run on the inner loop. And even in setting up to run this now, I have the heavyweight Amtrak coach. It's a 6-axle heavyweight for their 50th anniversary. That derailed on the inner curves. So the good news is I already have all the track to fix this. What I'm going to do is take the R315s from the outer track and move them to the inner track. And then I bought R345 curves to put on the outside. What that's also going to do is push this track a little bit closer to the edge of the layout. I never wanted it to be right at the edge for several reasons. One, a derailment could literally send an N-scale train smashing to the concrete floor. And also, I just think it's more realistic, particularly if you're going to be rail fanning it at eye level and filming it. I think it's a little more realistic to have some scenery on both sides so you're not staring into the abyss. So when I upgrade these turns, I believe it'll move the track about an inch in each direction, but you can see there's plenty of space. The other upgrade I want to do is you'll notice on the back here, as soon as the Amtrak train gets out of the way, here's the laser pointer again. In a lot of my videos, I was parking other trains on just this loose piece of track back here just for display. And what I decided is I really want to make that an operable siding. So I bought a Kato number 6 turnout that's going to go in here. So the train will come through the station, it will go through here, and you'll actually be able to move trains in and out of this track. So with the buildings and the scenery, what you're seeing here with the temporary Christmas decorations is actually not as random as it may appear. It kind of was a mock-up, almost like an architect would make a massing model for what I wanted to do with the layout. So at a high level, here was the original plan. There was going to be a mountain in the back corner, and actually there still is, although I think I'm going to cut it back some because I added the siding, where this outer track, after it comes over this bridge, would go through a tunnel, and then this inner track here would ride along the base of the mountain. And that's still going to happen, but I'm going to have to cut the mountain back just because I do want that siding. What you see here, the train's conveniently crossing the river for me. All of these blue and silver decorations here, along with the blue lights, which really don't show up as well as I had hoped. This is going to be a river. And the river would come, as the train's conveniently crossing this bridge, the river would come underneath this truss bridge. And then under this bridge here would actually be a roadway paralleling the river that would go through here. I don't have anything representing that right now, but that's the reason for the girder section of the bridge. And that's still pretty much going to stay as you see it here. This portion back here that would sit at the base of the mountain, I only decided this with these temporary Christmas decorations. That really reminds me of Miller's Crossing, where you're filming the train in front of the barn and the Christmas tree farm. And I think that's also something I'm going to keep. I had thrown this other farm here the other day just sort of as a, what if I put the farm there instead, but I think it gets, it's a little tight there, gets a little bit lost, at least in terms of having a Christmas tree farm. So I think we're still going to have a farm and Christmas tree farm there. There's going to be 2 passenger stations because I do have a lot of passenger trains. There's going to be a little rural station here, and I already have the kit for that. My good friend who has a channel, Boondocking with Dennis, he gave me that as a gift a little over a year ago. That's going to be the rural station. It may go here on the outer track, but I've also thought about maybe trying to put it in here with a platform to either track, kind of like you see Minersville, the Reading and Northern Station up in Minersville, Pennsylvania. That's still to be decided. Alternately, it might go in the corner here where this barn is right now. I'll work that out. The other station here, which actually I painted this little gingerbread house to resemble Port Clinton. I don't know if any of you picked up on that on 12 Days of N Scale, but that was just my inspiration for it. My concept here is to, original concept was to make this entire area a town. And the town was and still is going to resemble Jim Thorpe. I'll talk about what's going to change. So when I do this in N Scale, I did want to make the Jim Thorpe train station here. In practice, I think it turned more into Port Clinton and Reading for the holidays at least, but that's okay. But I'm still planning to have Jim Thorpe Station and then something kind of resembling Broadway and Jim Thorpe here. And I'll probably even try to make a road that kind of climbs, like comes up and around the bend, like 209 does in Jim Thorpe, where the road rises but the track stays flat on the ground. This will become the parking lot, and I may even try just in this back corner, which sort of ends up idle space, maybe to make the Lehigh River, so that could be the Lehigh River, and then we can call this one the Schuylkill River. I'm not literally trying to replicate these Reading and Northern locations, but definitely drawing my inspiration from them. The big change I decided as I worked on this layout and filmed this layout for 12 Days of N Scale, the big thing I realized is 4x6, when you plot it out on, well, I'd say on paper, I actually did it in AutoCAD on the computer screen, you think 4x6 is so small, even for N Scale. The reality is, when I framed it out and put the track down, it actually feels really big. And my first instinct was to want to just start stuffing more track in the middle and make something a little more operational. But that really went against my original goal of this, of just keeping it simple, not having a lot of switches that can cause derailments and other issues. And I just want to give these longer trains room to breathe. I mean, it's very easy in N scale to put together a long train that suddenly looks like it's traversing 3 towns at once, where I want it to feel more like it's traversing a landscape. So what I've decided is, a lot of people, what they'll do, they'll put dividers down the middle of their layout just to kind of give it a sense of, having a couple different places. I'm not going to put a, hard divider, so to speak, but I do want to build a mountain that sort of runs from this corner out to about here. And then it'll have, where it comes down into the valley floor, and then it'll still come up to this mountain here. But the concept will be, if I'm sitting here at the rural station, I shouldn't be able to look across the layout and see my destination there. I should feel like I'm going through a journey, that I'm traversing some terrains and towns. So it'll probably end up being another, I'll call it a small tunnel, maybe something on par with the Nesquehoning Tunnel, which is really just a wide underpass, goes under Route 93. Probably build something like that, and then probably build up the scenery in this corner. With Pennsylvania, a lot of towns are built up on hills. I'll probably make a portion of a small town up on a hill here. Maybe something like you see in Nesquehoning or Tamaqua. And then you'll have that mountain, and then what I'll do is I'll keep the Jim Thorpe-like town kind of confined to this here. I don't want to take up a whole third of this layout with a town like I originally thought I did. I think it's just going to look too urban if I do that. So we'll kind of have our dense little downtown here, a second portion of a smaller town here. And then I think these areas in between, I haven't totally figured out what to do with them, but I'm just thinking this will be more like rural PA, where you have some houses spread out, maybe a second farm, maybe a little campground. I'm not 100% sure yet, but just something that evokes the feel of, rural Pennsylvania, so that as this train makes its journey, it feels like it's actually going from location to location. So there'll be more to come on that. I'm probably going to film a few more videos on this before I dismantle the temporary decorations. In fact, you're seeing a spoiler of it here. There is 4 locomotives on here. My guess is, as Santa flew across the Pacific Ocean delivering gifts this year, he must have found the lost cargo ship that had all of my N-scale pre-orders on it, because I got this beautiful Amtrak P-42 Genesis, the Operation Lifesaver, number 203. I think it's an absolutely beautiful train. That arrived after I filmed 12 days of N-scale, as did the Broadway Limited Union Pacific Big Boy, and this one is number 4012. That's the one that's up in Steamtown. So the other one you should have seen recently in my onboard camera video. This is Norfolk Southern 4270, as it looked before Reading and Northern bought it and turned it into number 270. That was not a pre-order. That was just I happened to be in the right place at the right time. It's a very rare train, but now it's mine. And then this little Baldwin 060 switcher, number 26, that's also a Steamtown locomotive. In all fairness, that did come before I filmed 12 days of N-scale, but although it works, honestly, I've been a little disappointed in it, hence I did not use it for one of my videos. But I think before I dismantle this layout, I want to do some reviews. So you'll probably see this layout a couple more times. In terms of getting to work on it, once I take these holiday decorations down, I should be able to get right to work on it. You can see I already have 1-inch styrofoam board put down. And the first thing I'll be doing, even before I lay the new track, is to carve out where the river's going to go. There will be another bridge here. This is something I'm thinking of scratch building or 3D printing. So I'll carve out the river, come up with some bridge abutments to put these things in permanently here, and then I'll lay the new track. And the critical thing when I do that is I'm going to have to block this out. It's primarily going to be a DC layout, even though I can flip it to DCC mode. So I'm going to have to do it in blocks. So this siding is going to have to be its own block. I'm probably going to keep the inner loop as just a single block, but then somewhere I'm going to have to actually separate the outer loop into 2 or 3 blocks, because if you want to maneuver a train out of the yard while another's sitting waiting to go in, you need to be able to turn portions of the track on and off separately. So those will really be the next steps for this one. And that's probably not going to happen until the warmer weather. I have been coming out here on these cold days to film, but I don't really relish the idea of working on it when it's this cold. So I'll probably be working on my switching layout more. But I think at this point I've said all I wanted to say about Winter Haven. Let's move on to Spring Valley. And welcome to Spring Valley. If you want to know where my love of N-scale model railroading came from, well, this is the place. This is my childhood layout. Now it has changed a bit, but I'll talk about that in a minute. My father built this for me. I can't take any credit for this other than operating the trains. It's hard to remember exactly when because I was very young, but it was either in the late 70s or early 80s. And I vaguely do remember him putting it together. Now the track plan on the outer portion of this is still all original. So you can see we have Norfolk Southern number 5295 taking a small freight train around, or as I prefer to call it, Reading and Northern 2013 that hasn't gone in the paint booth yet. But this is actually the layout. I bought this GP38-24. I needed a newer, more reliable 4-axle diesel because the turns are very tight on this layout, and the 6-axle diesels and my RDCs just couldn't handle it. So this is obviously a much smaller layout than Winter Haven. In fact, it's half the size. This one measures 4 feet wide by 3 feet deep. And this was built from Atlas Flex Track that was put over your typical cork road bed. He ballasted it after I moved out. For my entire childhood, it was just cork road bed. And the track plan has always been the same. The grade that you see the diesel climbing right now is pretty steep. So it slows down as it climbs up to the bridge, and then it speeds up when it goes through the rock cut. And he had also done this mountain. I do remember watching him do this mountain when I was a kid. This is just your typical plaster cloth draped over wadded up newspaper. So is this rock cut, although when he built it, it didn't originally have this roadway tunnel going through it. And I remember him painting it. I remember him doing the greenery. I remember he cast a few rocks out of plaster that got included in it. And the interesting thing now, I did not grow up in the Lehigh Valley, but now that I'm familiar with Lehigh Gap, this reminds me so much of Lehigh Gap, where you have some greenery, but you do see this red kind of shale rock exposed. And unfortunately in Lehigh Gap, that's because of contamination from the nearby zinc industry. I don't know if that's what my father was inspired by when he built this. He obviously traveled around, did a lot of rail fanning. I'm thinking more likely, though, it's the Western railroads. He always loved the Western railroads. I think he maybe tried to give it more that look, something like Colorado, Utah, Wyoming. He loved that part of the country. But I look at it and it kind of reminds me of Lehigh Gap, and that's cool too. So what was different about it when I was a kid, he always talked about doing buildings and doing towns, and none of these buildings, not a single one that you see, was here. In fact, all I had the old kit. I don't know, we didn't find it when we cleared out the house, but the old little N-scale house under construction, that was the only building I had. That's apparently gone. The other big difference is, I hope the camera's picking it up, there's a switch back here underneath the bridge. And this switch used to come to a siding that was flat. it just laid on the plywood here, and it actually came around and went something like this. So it was basically a very long siding. And after I moved out, I couldn't take this layout with me because I had, in fact, my first couple apartments, I had literally nowhere I could put it. So unfortunately I left it behind, but he finished the layout in that time, which I very much appreciate. He's a very skilled modeler. He did a wonderful job on this. So what he did, he changed it. He made this is like one of those coal dumps. You can see there's actually, and you do have a lot of these in the Lehigh Valley in the anthracite region. So these are pretty familiar, where they dump the coal, and they also have some sand and ballast, and they truck it in and out. He had always talked about wanting to do that, and he finally did it. And then this whole yard in here is new. It's got a 2-bay engine house. It's got a warehouse back here. It has 2 storage tracks. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines here. And then it's got another spur going to this like propane gas place here. So he added that. That's all new. He added this little rural station here, which I like very much. It reminds me of the old train stations we had where I grew up. And like I said, he also added this roadway. He added this roadway, and then he cut out a portal as if they're going, I guess, through here and underneath the track, and then who knows what happens back in there. It's fictitious. But the nice thing about this layout right now, I mean, other than the sentimental factor of getting it back, I mean, I'm looking at it now, and I just in some ways still can't believe my eyes that I have it back, because I really miss this. This was such a big part of my childhood, you can't imagine. I mean, I literally ran trains almost every single day on this. I remember my mom used to have to call for me to come up and do homework or take a bath or go to bed or something, and it was just, come on, one more lap, one more lap. I've always loved playing with this. And what's neat about it now, other than the fact that I have it back, is it's the closest thing I have to a finished layout. Now, it's not 100%. It probably looks that way on camera, but there is some work that needs doing. Right now, this switch that you see the train going through, this is supposed to be controlled electronically by this Atlas switch. That no longer works. And it does make a buzz when you turn it on, so I think the electric's flowing. I think what happened when he ballasted the track is something got jammed up in there. Now, you can throw it manually. The problem is that location all the way at the back under the bridge, it's virtually impossible to reach. Not impossible, very difficult to reach back there and do it. So for all intents and purposes, this siding right now is just for decorative purposes. So I do want to fix up that switch, and when I do work back there, there's just a tiny little sliver of land on either side of the bridge abutments here that didn't get any scenery. I'll probably just make that gravel or something, finish that off. And then the other thing is he never wired up this yard for operation. So there's this control panel here on the side with these toggle switches. These were the original blocks for controlling power. This is a DC layout, obviously, given its age. You had one block for, the main line. And then I think he had this inner part was actually blocked out into several blocks, I think. Not 100% on that. What I believe is that this control panel was still the original. And so he disconnected the wires from those tracks and never reconnected anything for here. I'm obviously going to need a lot more than 4 blocks for that. The other thing is there's this blank portion of this. I had a different power pack on it when I was a kid. Not a very good one. It was just a very simple lever kind of throttle. And he did upgrade it to this nicer MRC power pack. And I always liked that. He had one like this on his HO layout that I always enjoyed playing with. It had much finer control of the throttle, and then it also has the braking and momentum feature, which is just much more realistic for operation. So he upgraded that. And I'm going to keep that power pack. I'm going to keep this a DC layout. But obviously I have to wire up this yard here. Another thing that needs finishing, you can see there's some of the plywood exposed. These buildings in the middle here were maybe not as well thought out, and it actually has 2 gas stations. This is the back of a Gulf, or actually, no, this is the Exxon station. This is a Gulf station, has Exxon gas pumps and a Gulf sign. So it's 2 kits merged into one. I'm thinking what I want to do is keep it probably just the Exxon. I may use this Gulf station on my switching layout since I do want a gas station on that layout. I'll have to get a second set of gas pumps, but that's probably pretty easy. And then I think what I might want to do with this area here is put like a control tower for the yard, something for the railroad, maybe a yard tower, an office or something like that. And then obviously just you know, put either some pavement or gravel or a combination of just to finish the scenery portion of it. And then he also added this extension track here. This was not here when I was a kid. And the purpose of that, you'll find out the 4th layout I'm going to show you. He actually added that so that these 2 layouts could be joined into one. So that's where things get interesting. Do I have 4 layouts or do I have 3? I think it's ultimately going to end up feeling like 3, but this and the last one you'll see will be joined. It'll almost be more of a modular layout kind of arrangement. But for now I'm counting them separately. A few other little items. This switch here almost looks like a switch he made. And when I do try to back a train into here, anything bigger than these very small cars derail, like the Tropicana car and the Rock car, they will derail. So I either have to limit to running this to really small cars, or I don't know what I could do to fix that switch. There's not a lot of space, but that needs to be worked on. And doing all that would literally get this layout to 100%. And also I do have to wire power into this, but I'm probably not going to do that till I connect it to the other layout. But anyway, the work to finish the scenery, fix this switch, wire up the yard, and just kind of rework here. I'm actually hoping I can get most, if not all of that done this year. It would just be nice to have one that I could say is 100%. Now, you guys know if you're into model railroading, even when you say a layout's 100%, it's not 100%. Because the other thing that I may do, and this is going to be further down the road because I have a lot of learning to do, is I would actually like to light up these buildings. Nothing's lit up right now. In fact, that is something that needs repair. This water tower, which says Spring Valley on it, this is supposed to have a little red light on top. What you're seeing here is my laser pointer. I would like to get that light working. And then the nice thing is here, he did not actually fasten down any of these buildings. So there's plenty of opportunity to light them up. Maybe even for this corner one, which is a little more prominent, try to do some kind of interior. Yeah, but that's literally it, guys. That's the closest thing to a finished layout, and I don't know what else to say about it. I'm just so happy to have it back in my life. I unfortunately had a rocky relationship with my father, but, you know, there was still a lot of good in that relationship. Trains were always the thing we bonded over the best, and, you know, I gotta hand it to him. He's a very good modeler. He did a wonderful job not only building this layout, but putting these building kits together here. You know, he's even done, I don't know if you can see on this warehouse here, you know, like some vines growing up the side of the warehouse. He did, you know, a nice brick, like a grout, like a light colored grout wash in the bricks on this one here and in the firehouse. Just really happy with it. You know, if I can build my own to this level of detail, I'll be very happy. So that's going to wrap it up for Spring Valley, and we're going to move into the house now where I unveil the name for my switching layout. Okay, we're inside the house now looking at the switching layout, and it's nice to thaw out a bit because it's cold outside and almost as cold in the garage. Now, if you've been with my channel for a long time, you'll recognize this switching layout as the one that I framed and did a tentative track plan for last winter. And then because life happened, I never got back to working on it. I have a series and a playlist. I'll put a link to that if you want to see how this layout got its start. Now that said, I have operated it a lot. I mean, this is something I just come in here occasionally and play with. And through playing with it, I did make some minor modifications to the track plan since you've last seen it. And it is finally at the point that it is ready to start working on again. So since we last checked in on this layout, I have given it a name, and given that we're going through the seasons here with the layout names, I've named this one Summerton. No particular reason for that name, just sounds like it could be the name of a city. And it's hard to say that this one's really going to be summer themed, because it's mostly going to be an urban rail yard kind of layout. Probably could look like it takes place in any season, but Summerton it is. And if you're also getting acquainted with it for the first time, this is my smallest layout. It's only 13 inches deep, though it does measure 58 inches end to end. And it was built literally to fill the width of the room. This is part of a wall-mounted set of shelves. I replaced one of the shelves with the bench work. And the reason for this oddball little corner cutout here is just because when I come in the door, I didn't want to be hitting the point of a corner and constantly banging into it. Now that said, now that I have finalized the track plan, I do need to extend the frame just a little bit. You can't see it clearly here, but on this end, there is just enough room that if I slide another 1x3 on this side, I can keep this track flush with the edge. And then these little bumpers that are hanging over the edge here, they will finally land on solid ground. Now the track plan itself, I've been surprised. A lot of people who've seen my older videos recognized right away where I got it from. It was originally called the Gum Stump and Snowshoe Layout, and it was published in a model railroader track planning idea book. It was designed by Chuck Youngkirth, and the original version was a 6-foot by 1-foot HO scale layout, though obviously I've replicated it here in N scale. And I've made one other very big modification to it. The original Gum Stump and Snowshoe lacked something that I consider vitally important for a switching layout, and that's a runaround track. Because you can see right here, this diesel, it comes down to the mid-tier, backs up under the bridge, pulls forward into the yard, but now you have the diesel here, and the freight cars are still behind it. You need a way to swap the diesel to the other end, but the diesel will pull forward, uncouple from the freight cars, go through the runaround, hook up to the back, and then push the cars into the yard and disconnect. And the other thing to know here is this white foam, these wood blocks and small sections of track and the fidget spinner and more white foam. These are just temporary to support the track plan while I worked on my idea. And they're ready to come out. I'm getting ready to start putting the real stuff in. This green foam that makes up the base is the permanent foam, and I'll be building up the actual terrain with the same kind of green foam. Now a lot has to happen before I can do that. I do need to wire this layout up properly. Right now I'm just using a single Kato standard SX power pack. Probably going to stick with that, but these sidings need to be broken down into several blocks. I mean, I don't really plan to run multiple engines on it, but I'd like to have that option. For example, you could have, pretend it's two railroads. You could have one railroad bring things down and then the other railroad come in like it's an interchange yard and do the operation. So I'd rather build that in at the beginning and not regret it later, and if I don't use it that often, that's okay too. So anyway, in terms of buildings and scenery, these buildings right here are just, for now, props. I'm probably not going to actually use any of them on this layout. What I plan to have here, I want a row of houses. The road's actually going to come down below the bridge, and the road's going to go up towards this yard. And I just want a row of homes here with the street kind of going by. And then this back corner is going to be some kind of industry. I haven't decided yet, but if you're going to do switching, you really need industries. Over on this side, this is going to be the main rail yard where you have this excess amount of white foam here. I'm going to build in this area some kind of warehouse where you'll have the cars can roll up to the platform for loading. And then this will be like, actually this track here, this outer track will be more of like the interchange track if this were to go off to another railroad per se. And it's possible that someday if I have more space I may turn this into a modular kind of thing. So I'm trying to plan ahead with that, but it could also just be a lot of storage track for now. So here I'm going to build some kind of retaining wall. You'll have the bridge abutments here. And then I'm going to have this road, there's going to be a road as if it's going off in the background. I am going to do flats on the wall here. And I think I'll probably actually attach them to the wall versus the layout just so that when I want to remove this to work on it, it's easier. But I am going to do building flats here that give it the look of like a city scene. So this will be some kind of road. Maybe I'll give it a little bit of perspective that looks like it goes into the city. Likewise, I'm actually going to put another road here with I'm going to custom make a tunnel portal that the road's going to be able to go in here. So it kind of starts to give the look of city blocks. And then in the foreground here, depends on space. I think this diner, you guys are actually getting a sneak peek. This was one of my early 3D printing efforts, and it has some issues. But I like the overall design. It's that classic stainless steel diner look. I think I'm going to modify this design to make it have a little bit less depth so that it fits here. So you'll have a road that comes here. You could either go to the warehouse and rail yard or you can go to the diner. I want to try to fit a gas station here if possible. It's going to be a little tricky. I have to see how that works. And then I'll probably try to put some sort of signal tower or some sort of rail yard buildings here. Maybe make, maintenance away department or something in front of the retaining wall. And that's really going to be about it. The idea of this build here was to keep it, relatively simple, just so that I could learn the basics of model railroading and designing and constructing these things and doing some of the 3D printing. It's still going to be quite an undertaking, but given that we're in winter and this one is indoors where it's warm, this is where I'm going to be putting my upcoming effort. But before we leave this one, and before I unveil my fourth and final layout, I just wanted to point something out here, guys. If you're looking around my room, you're not imagining it. This is 2102 in HO scale. Of course, it's the Reading version, not the Reading and Northern version. But that is one of several engines that I have in HO scale now, and we'll talk about that in another video. But for now, let's leave Summerton, and we're going to go back to the garage so you can see the fourth and final layout in my collection. Alright, we are back out in the garage now, and you are getting your first look at Autumn Pass. And of the four layouts, this one was the hardest one to name. I wanted autumn versus fall in the name. It just sounds better. And I kept coming up with Autumn Gorge, which made me think of Lehigh Gorge, which, believe it or not, is not what I'm going to be trying to model here. And so my friend Colin from PA and Northeastern Railfan, we were talking about it one night, and he came up with the idea to call it Autumn Pass, and I decided I like that. So thank you, Colin. You have named this layout for me. Now, believe it or not, this is actually my second most complete layout. The bench work is done, the track is laid and mostly ballasted, and you can see on the left-hand side a mountain is started with some of the plaster draped over the wadded up newspaper. However, this track is not operational yet. There is wiring underneath. I haven't really gone through it in detail to see if it's usable for the way I want to use it. It didn't come with a power pack, so I'm going to have to decide what I want to do for that. My intention is to keep it a DC layout because it is going to hook into Spring Valley. And for just having trains go round and round, I don't really see the need for DCC. If anything, I'll do a hybrid controller like I did on Winter Haven to get sounds if needed. In fact, that probably is what I'll do. But this layout actually needs a lot of work before I can even think about powering it up. For starters, this truss bridge is actually not even connected here. So I'm going to have to do that. I believe he left it loose because it still needs some bridge abutments. Now, if the track plan itself looks familiar, that's because it is very similar to the Woodland Scenic Ridge layout that they make in N scale. However, this is a double main line, where the Woodland Scenics is just a single main line. And I don't believe the Woodland Scenics has this extra bend in here. And then this also has this little spur here, is what will connect it to Spring Valley. Another problem right now, this switch is in really bad shape. It can only operate if you literally push on the rails. The switch mechanism itself is completely broken, and the only position I can lock it into would be for the train to do the crossover. It will not align properly to allow me to operate the outer loop on the main line. So even if this were powered up, I would only be able to run the inner loop. The other thing is this was in a very damp basement for I don't even know how many years. Now it does appear that he tried to weather the sides of the rails. I shouldn't say tried. He did a very good job. I think the rails actually look more authentic on the top here. But whether the top is badly oxidized or whether he just never cleaned up the paint or stain from the weathering, I don't know, but right now in its present state, there's no way that these rails are going to conduct power. And then also, I don't even want to tell you how many spider webs are inside these tunnels. When I say it's going to need to be vacuumed out, I mean that quite literally. And I'm probably also going to have to cut out some of the styrofoam on the back of them just to reach in to clean them. Another issue when this does meet up with Spring Valley is the profile on this mountain is not the same. Particularly in the back, it dips down. Until I physically put them together, I'm not going to know exactly how well it does or doesn't match, but my thinking is because Spring Valley is so complete and so sentimental to me, I will modify Autumn Pass to match the profile of Spring Valley, not the other way around. Now, actually, I just realized I forgot to tell you where this layout came from. So, when we were both very young, my father built my sister and I each a layout, an N-scale layout. You've seen Spring Valley. Her original layout is long gone. And honestly, he really cheated her. He did a much better job on mine. Hers, he just put down a loop of track with another track that cut through the inside, and I think that was it. I don't remember him ever doing scenery. She just had one of those styrofoam tunnels. So from what I understand, at some point, he started building this one for her as a way to make up for her having an honestly shitty childhood layout. When we cleaned out their house, unfortunately, she did not have room in her house for this layout. And she agreed to let me take this layout and complete it. But this one now is officially mine. And so this is going to be themed for autumn. I want this whole mountain to look ablaze with fall colors. And in terms of what I want to put in the interiors here, I'm thinking I want this to be some sort of like campground, resort, vacation area. In fact, I literally decided just tonight, I realized I have that Sunset Motel kit that right now doesn't really have a home on any layout. I think maybe put that and that little Dairy Queen, maybe on a road coming in here somehow. Maybe I'll put a road bridge, I don't know. And then what I do want to do here, and this is, I'll have to work out the details, but I definitely want to put, and I learned a new word recently, guys, and I love this word, an agritainment complex. Now, what that is agricultural entertainment. And if you've seen any of my Strasbourg videos, there's the Cherry Crest Adventure Farm. I want it to be something like that. Obviously, it's not going to be as big or elaborate, but at a minimum, I want hay rides, I want a corn maze. I want it to be a farm, but I want it to be a farm that people come to do, maybe put a pumpkin patch where they can get their pumpkins, take hay rides, do the corn maze, maybe have a petting zoo, just something like that. And you can see from me describing these things now why I say I don't want this to be Lehigh Gorge, even though originally when I got it, I kind of thought that's what I was going to do, of just make it nothing but scenery, but there's no river, and given that he put the track right on the plywood, there's not really a good opportunity to put a river in without ripping up all this track and redoing it, which I really don't want to do. That's the overall plan for it. I wish I could tell you more specifics, but this layout of all four is unfortunately the lowest priority. I definitely envision getting Spring Valley 100% finished, probably not including the lighting, the buildings in that, but literally finish and fix everything on Spring Valley. I'd really like to get my switching layout 100% or close to it, and I'd like to make significant progress on Winter Haven. And when those things are done, then I'll turn my attention to this. But to be perfectly honest with you guys, you're probably not going to see this one again for quite a long time. Anyway, I've talked long enough. I hope you guys have enjoyed this tour of Winter Haven, Spring Valley, Summerton, and Autumn Pass. And thank you as ever for watching, and I'll see you down the tracks.